Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is the Breaking Free Show. And it's so nice to have you join us today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying the beginning of, well, for us, it's summer. It should be spring, but we're going right into the 90s here in North Carolina. But it's all so cool. I hope everybody's doing great and feeling good. And it's just nice to have you here. And so before I get on with our show, I want to say hi to Amnon.
Hello, Marilyn.
How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, it is getting hot.
It is getting
Yeah.
hot, 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 hot.
Oh
I
well.
love it. Oh my god, I love it. I love swimming outside. I feel like I am in paradise. I've been swimming outside for the last couple of days. Oh my god, I just love it.
Oh, so you're not going to lecture me about global warming?
No,
Okay, good.
I'm not gonna lecture you about anything. Who am I to lecture you about anything, really, when you think about it? So Amnon is our producer. He is here and moving all the buttons around so we can do this show. Before I introduce my guest to you today, I just want to remind everyone that you're more than welcome, invited, please, 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 to call in anytime you want to 919-518-9773 if you have a phone. And if you choose to come in on Skype, you are more than welcome to come in on Skype voice. That is not a video, that is voice. And you will come in at computers, that's plural, then the number 2K voice. And you can also join us in our chat. So if you're watching us now and you see a video, there is a place right near our video where you can put your name, nickname, and a big window will open up and you can ask questions there. You can comment. You can do whatever you like. And I will remind you about this during the show. And if you are watching us on Facebook, you can do all the same things. Come to NissanCommunications.com and be part of our chat as well if you like. Otherwise, enjoy Facebook. So today you're going to be inspired, educated, and you're going to laugh. So my guest today is Don McNeill, who is a Mark Twain interpreter. And I got Mark Twain sitting next to me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here, but I think you set the bar awfully high with being inspired and laughing and all that. I'll do the best I can.
Well, that's all we can ask.
I'll earn every penny you're paying me.
I bet you will, since it's a lot. And
Huh?
so, since it's a lot, right?
I
Right?
told my wife, don't expect anything.
Well, she can expect, right? She can call in too. So
Yeah.
so you are a Mark Twain interpreter. I mean, doesn't he look like Mark Twain? Oh my God. Sitting here with him is like freaky. He looks so good. So tell us, Mark Twain, how?
How did this happen? I'm from Missouri, or as Twain said, Missouri. That's important. That's how he pronounced it. I'm from St. Louis. Lived the first most of my life there. Well, about half my life now. I moved here in '87, but I worked for American Airlines for 39 years. And I did something that I'm going to recommend that none of you ever do as you get older. When you retire, have a plan. I retired with no plan. And I went from working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to suddenly being retired. You know, at the airport, they take your badge away from you. You can't even go back to visit. So I was gone. Can't go back to see your friends. I was home for about 3 days when my wife, Carolyn, said, Don, you can't just hang around the house. I thought, well, she's right. So I decided to do volunteer work. I'm a veteran. I started volunteering at the USO. I enjoyed that a lot, but that still left me at home a lot of the time. So I needed to try other things. So I Googled different organizations. I tried a few, and then I Googled Toastmasters within 10 miles of my house. And there was a club, the Raleigh Talkmasters. So I showed up. I was only going to make a good faith effort by attending about 3 meetings. But I decided I liked public speaking and I had a new social group to replace my longtime friends from the airport. So that's kind of how that happened. Now, at that time, I had pretty much a buzz cut because I had to wear a headset at the airport. I had zero facial hair. Never had facial hair in my life. So I didn't know if my hair would grow out. I have relatives who are bald. I have relatives who have long hair. I didn't know how that was going to go. Stopped getting haircuts. My hair came out. But that left the problem of the mustache. And you can't look like Mark Twain without a nice mustache. So I saw one online from a company in Sacramento, a theatrical supply company. It was $85. So they mailed me the mustache. And my wife, before I went to a speaking engagement, she would glue the mustache on my face. And then I would go speak. Well, it happened that I was giving a speech one evening. It was at a Masons club. My friend Don Steichen, it's his club. And I spoke for 50 minutes. And I was through. I thought, thank God the mustache held on. But then he said, wait a minute, Mr. Twain. We have some college students here. What advice do you have for these college students? Well, I didn't have a Mark Twain line for that. So I had to say something that was Twain like, something I thought he might have said. So I pointed my index finger at these young people and I yelled at them, marry into money. And they laughed. The whole room laughed. And then I was able to escape. I went home thinking, I just can't do this anymore with a fake mustache. So the next day, I saw two of my grandkids, Caroline, and she was maybe 8 years old at the time. And I was talking about my mustache issue. And she said, what's that mustache made out of? I said, well, it's guaranteed to be 100% human hair. And she said, human hair from where? And that was the last time I let that thing touch my face. Now, there's an old expression, the answer was right under your nose. Well, that's where the answer was. The next day, I stopped shaving. And within about a month, I had a passable mustache. And within 2 months, I had a nice mustache. And it looks pretty good today because this is visual media. I shampooed my mustache for this show. So I want you to know that I didn't just arrive here not ready.
That's great. And your hair. So is that your hair or is that a wig?
This is my hair.
Okay.
It is not a wig. It came out just the way I wanted it to. I'm almost 70 years old, and I'm not losing my hair yet, which is amazing because I have relatives who did. But it is my real hair.
And do you curl the end?
I don't do it. No,
That just happens that way?
my hair is naturally curly, and I could show you pictures of Mark Twain, and his hair looks almost just like
Oh my
mine.
God, that's so why Mark Twain?
Um, I'm from Missouri, as Twain would say. I grew up loving everything about Mark Twain. When I was 8 years old, uh, our parents took us to Hannibal, and we visited Mark Twain's boyhood home. And I saw the house where he grew up, um, saw where it was situated on the river, and I was sold. I loved everything about it. And I bought a book from the bookstore there. And normally, children buy Tom Sawyer or maybe Huckleberry Finn. Now, at age 8, I bought a collection of Mark Twain speeches. And I went home and I started reading the speeches. And there were lines that I thought were so funny. And I would underline them. And with God as my witness, I swear this is true. I would stand in front of a mirror as a little kid and practice these lines. Never thought that this would actually happen. It really doesn't make any sense that it did happen, but it did. But that's how I got started. Um, the other puzzle piece that was missing was after I retired, I did join Toastmasters. and I started giving speeches. And in 2014, I entered the humorous speech contest for the state, and I decided to write a speech in the Mark Twain style, so that I could deliver the speech in the Mark Twain style. So I did that, and several people evaluated the speech and said, "Well, that's fine, but you can't win with that speech." And the major objection they had was I told a 7-minute humorous speech without smiling once. And I did that, and I didn't care if I won or lost. I wanted to do it in the Mark Twain style because he would speak for an hour, never smile, forget laughing. That was just out of the question. So I was going to do it Mark Twain style no matter what. And the next year I thought, yeah, I'm going to try this again. So I wrote another speech, delivered it Mark Twain style, and I was really lucky. I came in second in the state. Why am I telling this story? I really believe that if Mark Twain were alive today, he would still be considered very funny. His style of speaking. Now, I didn't steal one word of his, but I just told the stories in his style. And much to my amazement, and my wife was flabbergasted to find that people actually thought that was funny.
So his style, explain to us what his style was.
His style is almost deadpan. Some people in Twain's era said that he was not only dry, that he should speak from the middle of the desert. And the other key thing about his style is the misdirection, which is often used today. And Mark Twain really was in the vanguard of that style, where you start a story and slowly convince the listener that they have some idea where the story's going. And then Twain would throw in the misdirection, and the story would go in a totally different direction, surprising, even shocking the listener. And the other hallmark of Mark Twain speaking is the pause. Mark Twain was king of the pause. He was the first writer to even talk about how he did pauses. Today, we would find his pauses to be a little bit excruciating for most people, because people would want to pull the words out of him if he were alive today. But remember, people in those days, there was no social media. People were much more patient than we all tend to be today.
Can you give us an example of the turn? Like, give us something in his writing that shows the turn, like what you mean by that.
The misdirection.
Yeah.
A good example would be a story he started with, one of his classic stories, and it's about a fire in Hartford, where he'd set up where there was a fire not far from his house, and obviously a house fire is a very serious thing. So people were given the signal that this is serious. Well, then Twain would say that he arrived at the fire department wasn't there yet. There was a man in a second-story window crying out for help, pleading for help. No one did a thing. Twain said, finally, he took action. He said, I called for a rope. When the rope arrived, I threw one end up. The man caught it. I said, tie it around your waist. He tied it around his waist, and I pulled him down. Then he would give a long pause to let the audience think about what the hell just happened. And then Twain would say, the coroner reported that the man died with no burn injuries. And that was because of the action that I took. And I wonder how many of you would have taken action in that situation. I just wonder. That was one of his favorite opening stories where he would talk about how nothing was said about fire safety. So he was teed up by that fact. But he could take a story. His genius was he could take a story about a man dying in a fire and make the audience laugh. And I'm not sure anyone today could do that. People today would say that that's not funny. That's outrageous. But he made it work.
And do we still find him funny?
My experience is that we do.
We do.
I've told that story probably 70 times at various events. Never fails to get a laugh. But I must say, if there are 70 people in the room and they hear that story, about 5 are going to be upset that the man died because they didn't get the signal that this isn't real. It's just a story. It's not to be taken seriously. And there's nothing you can do about those people. I've had friends who said their husband or their wife just didn't get it, and that poor man died. How can that possibly be funny? And they try to explain to him what happened here. And for some people, well, everybody thinks something different is funny, and for those people, it's just not for them.
Well, if you're listening to this, not if, but you are, call us 919-518-9773 or Computers 2K Voice, or join us on our chat. What is it about something funny gets you? And would you be laughing at this? Because it's sometimes sometimes things in life are just so crazy you do laugh at the turns that things take. Sometimes things start off a certain way and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, something else happens and you cannot help but laugh. And I don't laugh at, people going through bad things, but sometimes you just have to laugh, right?
I couldn't agree more.
And I'm fascinated by this thing about the pause, because as a listener, the pause is very important. And I have the pause signal on my website. Because it's important to kind of stop and assess, process, check it in, check it out, see where you are, see what's going on in the room, see what's happening.
Mhm.
It's such an important tool for communicating.
All the great speakers used it. Mark Twain, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr. certainly was master of the pause. Winston Churchill was a student of the pause, used it often. Twain was the only one who wrote about it, actually wrote about the proper way to use the pause and how important it is. Twain said, there is no word more important than a rightly timed pause. And I think it's true. You listen to most speeches today, most speakers have lost the art of the pause. It's like they're in a hurry to get their message out because they know their audience has a short attention span. But I believe even the audience today responds to the pause when it's used correctly.
It's interesting. I was just telling somebody the other day, I did a workshop with a colleague once, a long time ago, and it was for the Bar Association. And something was said, and she and I had turns. So she would take a turn, and we knew what our turn was. So something was said, and timing is important, just like a good joke, right? You got to have the right timing. I kind of stopped and I could see the audience. I could hear the audience kind of taking it in. And I knew it took some time to process. So I kind of backed off. She didn't think I knew what my next thing was to do, my part. So she jumped right in.
Oh.
And that was a perfect example of the pause. It's like I wanted to pause. And then and she wasn't with it at the moment. Have you ever heard of Eckhart Tolle?
Heard it, yes.
He's a phenomenal writer and speaker, and I saw him in real life. He's written several, The Power of Now, and several
Oh,
books, The
sure.
Good Earth, whatever. I watched him in real life. He came on stage one time. He put a chair on stage and sat there and said nothing. His pause was in the beginning of his talk, said nothing. And you could watch the audience kind of move around, not expecting this. Nobody knew what to do. And then all of a sudden he spoke and he described coming in and were you uncomfortable by that? And acknowledging that we have to fill up every moment and we don't.
Yeah. Well, he probably read Mark Twain's
I bet
autobiography
he did.
because Twain one time decided to take the pause to the ultimate. And he came out on stage, an evening event. There were about 600 people who had paid to hear him. He came out, stood center stage, and slowly scanned the audience with his eyes, and scanned the audience, and scanned the audience. The tension in the room built until a woman in the audience couldn't stand the tension, the stress, and she broke. She burst into laughter, and then ripples of laughter went through the audience. And Twain later wrote, "That's when I knew I had him. That's when I proved the power of the pause." Not one word had been spoken.
Isn't that fat? And I bet you Eckhart Tolle did that. I bet you he understood that. Isn't that fascinating? Because I never saw anybody do that before.
Mhm.
So okay, so Mark Twain was sitting here now. I'm getting this Zippo education into Mark Twain like I've never had, and it is fascinating. It's like I want to go back and read about Mark Twain, just like I did when I heard about Thomas Jefferson. I mean, they're brilliant. He is brilliant. So, do you, as an interpreter, is there a certain tone, sound? How do you get into character? Like, can you get into character now? Is there a getting into character, or is it just how is it?
I've been doing this so long that I think I kind of go into character whenever I want to. But when I start a story, it's really no effort for me to go into character. You know, I was a Mark Twain scholar at the University of Missouri St. Louis in the 70s. I'm from Missouri. This is what I've done pretty much my whole life. I'm a Mark Twain scholar and interpreter. And I don't know if I mentioned it. Did I mention the word interpreter, what that means?
You didn't today, but you did yesterday when I spoke to you, and I think it's very important. Not think it's very
Okay.
important for everybody to understand this in general.
Yeah.
So please do.
Um, I use the word Mark Twain interpreter because we don't know what Mark Twain sounded like. We don't have one word of his voice preserved. His voice was recorded perhaps 100 times. In fact, he tried to record a book, but it was such a laborious endeavor in his time to do that on the wax cylinders. And he finally gave up that project. It just couldn't be done. But those tapes were eventually all destroyed in a fire. And people who study that sort of thing say that even if one of those wax cylinders was found in an attic in Hartford today, that the Twain's voice is lost, that wax cylinder would be deteriorated to the point where Twain's voice could not be heard. So we have no idea what he sounded like. I have to say, I'm from Missouri. I'm familiar with the Pike County dialect, the accent there, and I stand behind saying I may sound as much like him as anyone, but there's no way to prove that.
So be Mark Twain now.
Well, let me tell a story.
Go ahead.
In Hartford, we have perhaps the most famous dentist in the world, Dr. Tushmaker. Now, Dr. Tushmaker was so innovative that he often invented tools to be used in the field of dentistry. that became the standard tools for all dentists. One day, a man came in to see Dr. Tushmaker. The man had a sore tooth. The doctor examined the man and determined the tooth must come out. Dr. Tushmaker put the pliers on the tooth and yanked, but the tooth didn't budge. But the man's right foot came off the floor. Dr. Tushmaker said, "Why are you doing that?" The man said, "Because I can't help it." The doctor said, "Well, you go home, come back in 1 week, and I'll take care of you." Now, during that week, Dr. Tushmaker invented a new tool that combined the properties of the screwdriver, the hammer, the plane, and the pliers. When the man came back in a week, Dr. Tushmaker applied the new tool. One crank, and the tooth came out, along with the man's entire skeleton. It seems that the root had gone all the way to the man's right big toe. And when the tooth was extracted, so was the skeleton. The man had to be sent home in a pillowcase. Dr. Tushmaker told the widow he was sorry. And he was sorry. And he said it would never happen again. But other than that one incident, Dr. Tushmaker had a sterling career without blemish until that day.
Come on, I'm not. You got the sounds, right?
But again, it's a story where someone dies.
Was that most of what he spoke about?
There was a lot of death in his comedy. Mark Twain said all comedy is based on tragedy, and he was the only one, but he was certainly the first one to have that opinion.
You know, yes. The other day I was listening to something on NPR, and it was an author talking about a character in her book, and the character was doing some crazy things. And I'm writing a series of books, and so when I hear somebody talking as an author, whether they're writing fiction or nonfiction, my ears perk because I want to learn. And she said, with her character, though, there are things within the character that are ordinary, that are normal, because in order for us to relate and to enjoy a work of fiction or non, we have to be able to relate in some way, shape, or form to that character. It's the same thing with the stories that Mark Twain sharing.
Yeah.
There's an element of realism of that even today that you can relate. That's what makes it so funny in some ways, I think, is that we can relate to it.
Well, no one likes to go to the dentist.
Nobody likes to go to the dentist.
That's part of the reason
exactly
that story works.
Exactly.
And think in his time when the tooth was pulled with pliers, a shot of whiskey, a pair of pliers, and there you go.
And you felt like your whole body was coming out. Amnon, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask Don. I'm a Star Trek fan. Did you watch Did you ever watch it?
There was an episode with Mark Twain.
There were two of them, and the way that he was talking was it was up and down and up and down and up and down. That was not a scientific thing. I mean, somebody just decided to talk like that, or was it based on something?
Nobody who heard Mark Twain in real life and wrote about his speaking ever said that his voice went up and down.
it's just interesting.
In fact, his mother, Jane, said it best. She told how he even spoke differently than the other children. I don't know how that happened, but his mother referred to it as Sammy's long talk. How she would feel like strangling him to get a story out of him. So Star Trek was entertaining, but no.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that, it sticks in your mind the way that things were going.
Absolutely.
But it was an interesting episode. And it's you always kind of, whenever I hear Mark Twain, I hear
him, because that's what
that
you
up and down,
because that's what that's what you associate with something.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So here's a question from Chris, and everybody, may this not be the only question we have. You are welcome to ask too. So here it goes. Can you tell the great story for our audience about how Samuel Langhorne Clemens chose the pen name Mark Twain?
Mark Twain is a nautical measurement. It means 2 fathoms or 12 feet. And there's some controversy about why he chose that name. But the one that makes the most sense to me is Mark Twain lived his life right on the edge. And when when it was called out that the depth of water under the steamboat was Mark Twain, that signaled to the riverboat pilot, safe water. But it was just barely safe water. And when Twain heard that, it was time to light a cigar and relax. But he lived his life right on the edge, always in danger. So I think the Mark Twain expression was perfect for him. Now there was a steamboat. There was a pilot before Mark Twain named Isaiah Sellers, and Sellers used that as a pen name also, but he never became famous. And Twain admired Sellers, but when Sellers died, it was left open, and Mark Twain was glad to use it. But I think that's the best explanation, and it was the perfect pen name for him. Later on, his wife didn't like it because she said that Mark Twain doesn't sound like a great writer. You should call yourself Samuel Clemens, but he wasn't going to give up the name Mark Twain because it was what he was all about, and always reminded of himself about the time on the river. And I'd like to say also that Mark Twain never had the advantage of a Toastmasters club or a speaking club or any of this stuff. A lot of his practice public speaking was on the riverboat. He was the pilot, so he took orders from nobody in the field of navigation, not even the captain. So you have to remember that when Twain was told that he had safe water under him, it was storytelling time. And everyone knew they could come up and stand there with the pilot and tell stories. And of course, the chief storyteller was always Mark Twain.
Does it get I was going to say, does it get confusing for you? But do you have a clear kind of divider between you and Mark Twain? Or are you so connected that it's hard to know the difference now?
I thought, you know what, Marilyn, that is really a good question. No one's ever asked me that.
I have another one coming.
It may be just a coincidence that I speak slowly and deliberately like Mark Twain did. But as far as the use of the pauses, I picked that up from studying him, from studying his book.
But it made sense to you.
It made perfect sense.
It didn't need to be explained.
And it suited my style anyway.
Right.
Because as a child, I spoke slowly. And I can remember my mom saying, "Don, get it out. What are you trying to say?" Because I spoke slowly. I even walked slowly. Imagine a 5-year-old, his parents told him to speed up instead of slow down. But that was me. My parents always said, I had trouble keeping up with my grandfather. I walked slow. It was just for me, it was just
And what
natural.
about height? How tall was Mark Twain?
Mark Twain, about 5'7".
Uh-huh.
So I'm a very tall
You're very tall.
I'm a very tall Mark Twain.
Mhm.
There's not a lot about his his fitness, his doctor's visits. Not a lot of that survived, and a lot of that is because he hated visiting doctors. He joked about that all the time. He said doctors do know so little, and they do charge so much for it. But he loved making fun. I start almost every Mark Twain speech by apologizing to lawyers, doctors, and politicians because you can't tell Twain stories without making fun of those three groups. So I always do that.
It's so it's so fascinating for me. I love when authors write a book about a book, and I love when individuals take on a character and I've had several professors in here over the years who have been experts in, I mean, just Martin Luther King and just so many Dickens, and just I find it's fascinating to me that you can bring to life this character, this human, and I look at you now, and it's fascinating to me, and I'm like I'm wondering. So in your life, how did you even become Don? I mean, you learned so much from Mark Twain and his things that he say. How can you not believe those things for yourself
Hmm.
at the age of 8?
Well, if my wife were here, she would say that my pattern of telling humorous stories are very Twain-like.
Mhm.
She would say they're very Twain-like. And in fact, sometimes even my grandkids are looking at clocks and checking their phones as I'm telling a story because they're not used to that
Mhm.
deliberate speed
Mhm.
of speaking. But it's
It's
natural for me.
fascinating.
I can honestly say I've never done anything else.
And so, and you didn't choose to become, I mean, you most definitely a scholar. I mean, oh my God. If anybody's teaching Mark Twain in their classrooms, you got to have Don. You never, you did not consider, I shouldn't say it, did you consider becoming a professor?
No, I taught high school 1 year, and that was enough for me because my experience was I taught uh, English and American history, and my experience was that I had to be so careful what I said. Obviously, the Mark Twain stories were off limits because most of those stories, someone would have gone home and complained, and then I
Mhm.
would have heard from the principal.
Especially now.
So
Yeah.
a lot of what I said, I had to be so careful that I felt I didn't feel like I was a very good high school teacher. I feel I would be a good professor, but have I ever tried that? No. I like lecturing to people of all ages.
Mhm.
Um, the older the better, actually, because it's the older people who have often read Mark Twain's books, not just the Wikipedia version. I'm not knocking that, but that's what
Uh-huh.
we do these
How many
days.
times did you read his books?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I I I really don't know.
Mhm.
Tom Sawyer came first, then Huckleberry Finn, but I love his travel books. And at a recent lecture for the Jewish community, I had a I had a perfect chance to talk about Mark Twain's trip to the Holy Land, and that's what they wanted to hear. And an example of the irreverent humor that Mark Twain used, he talked about visiting the Sea of Galilee, which was a little bit, well, it was half the size of Lake Tahoe, Twain said. And he wanted boat transportation across the Sea of Galilee. And a young man said, "That'll cost you $8." And Twain said, $8. Do we need to wonder why Jesus walked?
Oh my God, was he quick?
That's one of his classic lines from his trip to the Holy Land.
Oh, that is funny.
There was one bit of controversy when he was in the Holy Land. Twain wrote, tongue in cheek, that when he visited the tomb of Adam, Twain wrote that he wept because he was 6,000 years too late to see his old ancestor Adam in person and speak to him. And there were readers who thought that that was very disrespectful for Twain to joke about crying at the tomb of his ancestor Adam. But Twain didn't care. It sold books. And if people wanted to be offended, it was really better for him if they were offended because it sold books.
Gotcha. Okay, so what's your favorite Mark Twain quote?
We ought never to steal things unless we can carry them off. He had a lot of quotes about lying. Those were classics. Never tell a lie except for practice. Twain always said, the average person shouldn't lie. That lying should be left to the professionals like me and politicians. And he's often quoted as saying, politicians and diapers should be changed often. And for the same reason.
Wow. Wow. So tell us something. I don't know. How did he die?
He died of heart disease. He died of heart disease. You know, he lived to be 74, which is remarkable. He lived to be 74 years old when the life expectancy for a man in America was about 56. He lived to be 74. He smoked as many as 40 cigars a day when he was riding. He would sit upstairs in the billiard room. It's the only room where his wife allowed him to smoke. And he would just smoke constantly, small cigars. He wouldn't smoke them all the way through, but it was just nonstop. And for someone to live to that advanced age while smoking thousands of cigars and drinking about a quart of whiskey a day for many, many years, and he still, against all odds, he lived a long life.
Well, I know it's interesting what kills people and what doesn't, and who's kind of meant to be here and who's got, meant to come back maybe. Okay, next question, because I have several. Why the white? Why'd he wear white?
Mark Twain started wearing white linen clothing when he was at a speaking event in New York one evening. And he said, all the women were in beautiful, colorful dresses. He said they looked gorgeous. And then he said he looked at the men. He said, by comparison, the men looked like a flock of crows. And that's when he made up his mind to wear white suits. And he sometimes referred to the white as his I don't give a damn suit, because he didn't care what anybody thought. In fact, he liked the controversy, but he realized that became his signature thing. And whenever he showed up at an evening speaking event, people expect the white suit. They didn't always get it. Sometimes he wore a brownish colored suit, but he's known for the white linen. That's why I wear it.
So what was his purpose for speaking and for writing?
Money.
Money.
He he always said, I hate work even when someone else does it. So he wanted a way to make money without actually working. And he had tried gold and silver mining in the Nevada territory. And he was a dismal failure, and it was hard work. And no one would hire him to dig for gold because he was miserable at it. He tried his hand at newspaper reporting. He commented that I hated taking a job as a newspaper reporter, but I couldn't find honest work. Finally, he was hired to go to Hawaii, the Sandwich Islands, and report back. And when he came back, someone told him, an agent told him, you should give lectures. Because at that time, the lecture circuit was very active. And he was told that he could talk about his trip and he could make a lot of money. So in San Francisco, a hall was rented in a hotel. A sandwich board was put on the outside of the hotel, and it said, Mark Twain speaks. Doors open at 7. The trouble starts at 8. Well, Mark Twain showed up almost 2 hours early, and he sat in the back room, and he wondered, can I go out and face an audience? Because he knew nothing about public speaking. He had never really experienced it. Public speaking to him was telling stories in a room full of miners who had been drinking. So Twain sat back there and realized that he had to come on stage because people had paid to hear him. And he said he was terrified, he was shaking. And finally, he came out and he started speaking, and someone laughed. And he said, that's the encouragement I needed. And he started telling stories about his trip. The audience laughed. And he said from that day on, of course, he gave hundreds of speeches. He was never scared again. Public speaking was never a problem for him. And I think one of the unique things that people don't realize now, Mark Twain was not just the greatest writer of his time. Mark Twain was the greatest speaker of his time. And I'm pressed to think of anyone else who you could say that about. I think the closest would be Charles Dickens, because Dickens was obviously a great writer, and he did do the lecture circuit. In fact, I'm always fascinated when famous people's lives intersect. Twain sat in the audience one evening when Charles Dickens was in America and gave a speech. And Twain sat in the audience, and that happened to be Twain's first date with his future bride, Olivia. That was their first date. And Twain was fascinated by what Dickens was able to do, making money speaking.
Yeah, we already asked that
Oh.
question. Yeah, I was going to say you must have to have kind of boned up on some other, you know, speakers, writers from the time to even know Mark Twain as well. One of the questions it's a woo woo kind of question. Are you okay with woo woo?
Keep going.
Would Mark Twain have known what that is?
No, but
Oh.
Don does, right?
Not
So
really.
okay. Well, do you like have dreams about Mark Twain? I mean, has he ever have you ever had an experience in your life where you felt his presence or him talking to you or guidance from him, or you went to sleep and he told you to do something, or you've had this kind of like he's right here kind of feeling? I mean, how many people are like you out here?
I hope nobody.
Yeah, that's my point.
I'm not sure I meant that, but that's a good question. I love that question because I was actually sitting in a restaurant one time, And a woman came over and said, if you don't mind, I'm going to do a reading because I'm fascinated to know if you're related to Mark Twain, if if you've acquired his spirit. And she went on. I said, that's fine. And she listened to me speak for a little while. And I remember she said, no, no, you're not the reincarnation of Mark Twain, but you have a piece of his spirit and you seem to be channeling him. And I've never told that story before, but I, 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 I must say I have dreamt about Mark Twain, but in my dreams, I was not Mark Twain. My dream was about the real Mark Twain. I've thought about what if he came back? How would people react today? And I've often thought about that. But did I answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. And I guess the extension to that is, do you feel that peace? Or do or have you been curious? Have you wanted to go to somebody else and or explore it even more?
I have to say, I've worked so long and hard on figuring out exactly where I think the pauses should go that at times I feel like I've almost got it perfectly, but I'm never going to say it was perfect because I've never listened to him. But I do the best I can, and I've worked awfully hard at it. And there are examples of his writing where he puts in dashes where the pauses were, and I've studied that at great length. And if I'm not the best at mimicking his use of pauses at this point, I'd like to know who is.
And what is hard about that? I mean, if you see the word and a pause, and what is hard in doing that?
The thing that's hard about it is Twain said he never decided the length of the pause. He said the audience has to decide the length of the pause. So he would tell a joke or have the line where he knew the audience was reacting and he'd watch their faces and he would time the pause based on the audience. It got to be such a science that on some of his tours, his wife Olivia would go with him, and she was in the audience for just one reason. She was there to time his pauses. And later at dinner and in the hotel room, she would grade him on whether or not the pause was perfect. Because Twain said it can't be off by 100th of a second to get exactly the right reaction from the audience. And he used the word crash. If I wanted the audience to crash, the pause must be perfect.
Isn't that, like who would even not, I mean, let me talk about me. I never have contemplated this before, but it makes perfect sense in a way. Because I like to observe my audience when I'm talking. I like to watch, what's their, where are they? Am I losing anybody? Are they moving around? Are they watching me? Are they laughing? Are they look uncomfortable? Do they look mad? I mean, even then, just having a reaction.
Yeah.
I guess the pause is the amount of time it takes to see whatever reaction somebody's going to have.
To get the maximum reaction without the audience
getting up
losing it or not caring.
Right.
Not caring is the worst.
Right, exactly.
If I may, I'd like to show a picture of my most important fan because things will go better with me on the home front. Twain said that. Things will go better for me on the home front if I do this.
All right. Hold it up.
This is
Amnon's going to tell you where it is. Is that good? Tilt it a little.
Me right after speaking at an evening event. My wife, Carolyn, next to me. And not long after this event, Carolyn decided to get herself a dress very much like the one that Olivia Twain wore.
How much alike are they in general?
You know what? I'd better let somebody else judge that. I I'm going to say that I think my wife Carolyn is better looking than Mrs. Twain. And now I know I can go home.
Oh, Carolyn, you're
I
a
ha-
special lady if you're listening. Okay, so tell everybody if they are interested, if somebody's interested out there in having you speak, what kinds of things where you speak, how to find you, all that kind of good stuff.
I've spoken at regional library events, civic events, of course, Toastmaster events, and corporate events. I've spoke for Cisco a few times, and it's interesting. But before the first time I spoke for, I found out later they were the top executives for Cisco, and the event organizer. I asked him, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "We're under a lot of stress. Give us an hour of absolute nonsense." I said, "That's what I do." And they turned out to be very happy. When the Angus Barn had their Mark Twain,
That's a local restaurant here, just so you all know.
yeah, when they had their Mark Twain dinner in their wine cellar, beautiful event, and I was honored. I was honored to be Mark Twain for that event, and my wife got a very nice meal out of it, which was good for me also. Um, I did an event as an example. My event at Hilton Head was wonderful, and it was an education for me to find out how these events were put together. I had no idea how much detail went into them. And on the list of people who had jobs at that Mark Twain event, one person, it was a woman, and it said next to her name, "Turn on Mark Twain." Now, I can tell you, I was intrigued by this woman having that responsibility, and I couldn't wait to see what she actually did. But her job was to make sure that I was mic'd up properly. It was nothing untoward
So
about her job.
so you would go anywhere in the country or the world for a Mark Twain event if they pay you.
Yes, and I do like to be paid. I'm paid about half the time I do Mark Twain events. But if it's an event at a university or a high school, I have spoken without being paid, and I enjoyed it just as much.
And through your talks, what is the most important thing you want people to come away with from your talks or even from today?
That's the perfect question, because when people when people listen to me, when I'm finished, I want them to really have the feeling that's what Mark Twain said 120 years ago. That's the feeling I want them to have. And I think most of the time I'm successful. I don't add punchlines to his jokes. I leave the story the way Mark Twain told it. And I'm the only one that I know of who does that, because there are some people, quite frankly, they want you to add a punchline. And I just don't want to do that. I want to stay true to his style.
I mean, what else do you need, right? So, anyway, before I end today's show, I just want to tell everyone, do you have my books? Okay, here are my books. They're up on Amazon. In just one afternoon, listening to the hearts of men, listening to the hearts of twins, and then my newest one, listening to the hearts of millennials. I'm having my book launch for the millennials on June 9th here in Raleigh, North Carolina at the Conference Center at the American Institute of Health and Fitness. It's a Sunday from 2 to 4. I have a panel of amazing millennials that are going to be talking about all things millennial, family, self-identity, and business. So if you are curious about a millennial, you work with them, you want to work with them, you're parenting them, You are a millennial, you want to talk to more millennials, this is the event to come to. If I can answer any questions for you about anything, please let me know. My next book is going to be about opioid addiction. So I want to thank you very, very much for bringing Mark here and for bringing him everywhere so that we can appreciate who we all are and our history and learn from everything. And I really appreciate it. So thank you.
It was great being here. Thanks for inviting me. And in case they were watching, my grandkids are Ben, Caroline, Nick, and Jacob. I did it. Thank you.
He did, and he was great. Bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.